Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
You know, ever since the emergence of bone broth, gelatins have become very, very popular again. I remember my mother used to use Knox gelatin. She said it was good for her hair and her nails. And you can still buy Knox gelatin at the grocery store. It doesn't taste good. It's unflavored. Yeah. When I was a kid, I worked at the racetrack, and Knox gelatin, the smell of it reminds me of the smell of when the blacksmith used to rasp the excess hoof off of a horse. It kind of smells like that. But there is a revived interest. And my next guest is Dr. Kieth Baar. How you doing, Dr. Baar?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
And you are over at UC Davis, correct?
I am, yes.
And your group recently published a study about using gelatin. Is it really good for joints? Why did this have to be answered? Isn't there enough gravity in old wives' tales that it is?
It certainly appears that way, because every time I would go to present any of the data that we've covered, generated in the last few years, people would say, "Oh, just like you said, my grandmother used to give it to me for growing pains," or, you know, all of these people used to use it for this, or my rugby coach used to give it to me as a way to prevent injuries. So there's definitely a lot of
anecdotal
old wives' tales out there,
yeah.
Anecdotal evidence that it is something that's effective.
But that's what science is all about, right? So science takes things that look like they do something and examines them and goes, yeah, it really does, or no, it doesn't. And really, we do need that, because you only put so much stock into N=1 type phenomenons. Like somebody says, oh, I did this and this is what happened. You don't really, gee, that may be just you. But when someone publishes a study, then we go, okay, there is some, there's validation here, and we can move past that and forget about it now.
Oh, definitely, because one of the things that you get into is if you're just going by what you think and what you perceive, that was basically a lot of what caused the Dark Ages, because all of science at that time was, based on this idea of I think, therefore I am. So if I can think it, it's a thought experiment. If I can do that, then that's the only evidence that I need. Whereas the reality is that's not in fact true. If we want to understand how something works and whether there's an actual physical basis to how it works, and not just a psychological basis for how it works, we have to actually have some sort of a test in order to, in a very, very basic way, be able to say yes or no, does it work?
So how is this study designed? Talk about the design of the study.
Well, so we started doing this actually because one of the things that we do in the laboratory is we actually engineer ligaments. So what that means is we get people's ACLs once they've ruptured them. So we live very close to Lake Tahoe, California, beautiful ski resort. And at this time of year, especially after last week's snow, when there were 16 feet of snow in Tahoe, there's a number of people coming down the mountain who've ruptured their ACL. They're going to go into the UC Davis Medical Center and get that repaired. And what we do is we go into the surgical suite and we get the remnants of their ligament. We isolate the cells from that and we put it into a dish with a little matrix, and we can make human ligaments in the dish.
Man, I wish I was around in the 70s when I lost my left ACL coming down the Bunny Hill of all hills at the Playboy Club in Great Gorge, New York. And I had a great surgeon back then because I got an uncle that played pro ball for the Mets, and he sent me to Dr. Jim Parks, and he's the guy who did Joe Namath's knees, and he said, you're not an athlete. He says, if you were an athlete, we would do something. He goes, just to make your quads stronger. And I had to follow his, he said to me, look, if we open up your knee, back then they did cadaver ligaments, I think it was. He said, if we open up your knee, we're going to put a cadaver ligament in there. He said, and you will absolutely get osteoarthritis probably in your 30s and 40s. He goes, if you were a $1 million contract holder, you do it, right? But you're not. He says, you're just a regular guy. He says, just go make your quads stronger. And that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah, and it probably worked pretty well because the second surgery or the second injury, the surgery is really a second injury, and so sometimes that can produce as much problem as it fixes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were trying to come up with a way that you wouldn't have to give up your own ligaments that are healthy or your own tendons that are healthy, and you wouldn't have to use a cadaver tissue. So that's what we were doing, is growing these. And one of the things that we found out is that when we add certain amino acids to the media, our ligaments that we were engineering became a whole lot stronger. And those amino acids were things that were enriched in the protein collagen, which forms the backbone for any of the tendons or ligaments. And so all I did was go and say, okay, if this works in our cell culture model, that's three-dimensional, it's human, it's got all these things, well, maybe it'll work in humans for real to make their tissue stronger. So what foods are enriched in these amino acids? And naturally, gelatin comes up. Because, as you were saying in your introduction, gelatin is actually just isolated and purified collagen that has come from either skin or other types of materials that are basically would have been waste products for the meat processing.
And remember, back in the day when my father was a young man, and I still, I learned how to eat chicken from my father. I literally eat the ends of the bones. I love the grizzle. That's collagen. You know what I mean? I love the marrow.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but today, most people don't even encounter that stuff. They go, ooh, that's so gross. But really, when you think about it, our diet has literally teased out anything that has collagen in it, because most people think that's yucky. It's like sinewy, it's tough, it's hard to chew.
The gristle.
Yeah, the gristle. But that's really so valuable now, and people are starting to wake up.
Incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the people that I work with is this wonderful sport nutritionist who's now the head sport nutritionist for New Zealand, and in the past she had been at the English Institute of Sport. And what she says is she calls it her hyena diet. That just like a hyena, her athletes should eat basically every bit of the tissue, so that you're getting all of those nutrients that are coming from all these different sources.
Okay, so now, what happens when people eat collagen? Is there an appreciable change in soft tissue modeling and strength? And if so, how long does it take?
Yeah, so what our study was designed to do is to see how quickly the gelatin resulted in changes of amino acids in the blood, and then if you made those changes in the amino acids in the blood, could you see an appreciable increase in collagen synthesis? So what we did is we gave individuals, either a placebo, 5 grams or 15 grams of gelatin, and every single person in our study did each of the different conditions. So they all did each of the conditions. It was a crossover design so that there weren't any inner human differences. And so what they did is they drank gelatin together with a juice that has a little bit of vitamin C in it. And then what they would do is we would take blood from them every half hour for 3 hours, and we measured the amino acids in the blood. And sure enough, the amino acids that are enriched in gelatin, things like proline and glycine and hydroxyproline, these all increased in your blood out to about an hour, and then they started going away. And then what we had them do is, when the amino acids were at their highest, we had them jump rope for 6 minutes. And the reason we did that is because basically tendons, ligaments, and bones all respond to exercise. We know that. But what they do is, unlike muscle, where you can continue to adapt no matter how long you exercise, after about 5 minutes of exercise, your tendons and ligaments and bones stop adapting to the stimulus. So it only takes about 5 or 10 minutes for you to maximally activate the cells in your bones.
Interesting.
And your tendons and your ligaments. So we use 6 minutes of jump rope to kind of maximize their stimulus. And then what we did is we measured collagen synthesis in the blood. And so what you do there is that when you make collagen, you're making a protein that's going to form this big rope. And in order so that it doesn't make that rope within the cells, it only partially processes it in the cells. And then once it's outside the cell, it's going to cut off the ends, the C and the N terminus are what they're called, and we can measure how much of that N-terminal peptide is in the blood. And that's a really good measure of bone collagen synthesis. And so what we did is we did that. So we measured that 4 hours after they took the initial drink. Then we had them continue to do the gelatin and jump rope for the next 3 days. And
Just one session each day. Just one session.
So we had them do 3 sessions a day. So the reason that we do that is because, like I said, it takes only about 5 minutes before your bones stop signaling, but it takes about 6 hours before they can turn on again. So what we did is 6 minutes of jump rope, 6 hours of rest, 6 minutes of jump rope, 6 hours of rest. And then we gave them the gelatin an hour before they did their jump rope. What we saw is that just jumping rope for 6 minutes every 6 hours doubled the rate that your bones synthesized collagen. So just doing that activity with that long 6-hour period in between, that resulted in a doubling of collagen synthesis in the bone. When we added 15 grams of gelatin, we got a further doubling. And so what that tells us is that if we've got people who have a history of, say, stress fractures or other bone-based injuries, or if they're coming back from an injury, they can use this intermittent loading pattern together with gelatin to really increase the rate at which you lay down that first level of what you need to make a bone.
Interesting. All right, we have to take a break. We've been talking about bone. I want to talk about soft tissue when we come back, okay?
Great.
Because this is obviously a big issue as well. We're talking with Dr. Kieth Baar from UC Davis. This is very, very interesting. In fact, I have been adding 11 grams of collagen powder to my post-workout shakes because I'm getting older, and I've already had several muscle tears, and maybe it's because I'm just not getting enough collagen in my diet. So we'll see. Stay tuned with that. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. I've said numerous times that Be Strong BFR bands are as effective, if not more effective, than anabolic steroids. And as someone who has used anabolic steroids for many years and used Be Strong BFR bands, I know what I'm talking about. You will see changes in musculature in days and weeks using Be Strong BFR bands, and without any of the risks to your health associated with anabolic steroid use. Go to shrnetwork.biz/BeStrong, that's BSTRONG, and use code SHR15 to save 15% off. I guarantee you will not be disappointed in the results of using the Be Strong bands. Check them out. There are lots of concerns about food supply today. That's why you need White Oak Pastures. White Oak Pastures will deliver food right to your doorstep. You don't even have to go out and be disappointed by shopping in grocery stores. The finest beef, pork, lamb, duck, and more can be found at White Oak Pastures. And now they even have seafood. And best of all, White Oak Pastures has a negative carbon footprint, which means that you don't have to feel guilty for eating your ribeye. Go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 15% off. There have been no real breakthroughs in resistance training for over 200 years. Whether it's pulleys or free weight, they all depend on gravity and the angles associated with gravity's effect directly on the weight. All of that has changed with the ARX machine. ARX stands for Adaptive Resistance. The ARX machine uses a 25 horsepower motor. You are literally fighting against a 25 horsepower motor, so every single rep is your 1 rep maximum at that moment in time. But ARX leverages another technique that has been known to produce rapid muscle gains and strength, and that is it leverages the eccentric or negative portion of the rep, which completely blows every other exercise and resistance training product out of the water. Go to shrnetwork.biz/ARX and discover the future of resistance training. Motto, spelled M-A-D-O, is the first energy drink of its kind, with a clinically effective dose of the strongest antioxidant in the world, milligram for milligram, astaxanthin, reasonable amounts of caffeine, and very low amounts of vitamin B6. Motto will not only energize your mornings, but protect your nervous system, the quality of your skin, and has been shown to preserve muscle mass. Go to shrnetwork.biz/motto, M-A-D-O. Use code SHR for 10% off. Plus, order 2 cases or more and get free shipping. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that connects customers with partnered providers from the comfort of your home. Merrick provides concierge service with your very own patient care provider as your health advocate. You'll go over all your needs and goals, from improving sexual function, hair loss prevention, increased muscle, fat loss, and overall improved performance. Prescribed treatment options can be ordered and shipped directly to you if you meet the requirements. All from the comfort of your home. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Merrick Health. That's MAREKHEALTH, and order your comprehensives and get 10% off with code SHR. Don't forget to add the lab analysis to have results reviewed with potential over-the-counter supplements or treatment recommendations. That's shrnetwork.biz/Merrick Health and use code SHR at checkout. Or order your own desired labs with code SHR and get 10% off your first lab order.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. Don't hate us because we feel good.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Kieth Baar from UC Davis about gelatin. And you know what? We're not talking about expensive stuff here, right? I buy Great Lakes organic, pastured cow gelatin, and it's very expensive. But let's be honest here. Jello would probably work, assuming it doesn't have a lot of artificial sweeteners and colors in it. I wouldn't recommend that. But we're not talking about expensive kind of gelatin here, right, Dr. Baar?
Yeah, exactly right. So when I make stuff for myself and for my daughter, what we use is classic Knox, because it's easy to get, it's food quality, and
cheap.
And I just use that, and I use it with a fruit juice that's going to have approximately 50 to 100 milligrams of vitamin C per serving.
Yeah.
So it's not a whole. It's a very, very inexpensive as far as most of these things go.
So we're talking about bone turnover and creation, but what about soft tissue and chondrocytes, right? So a lot of people take expensive glucosamine and chondroitin supplements with the understanding that this is going to contribute to the building blocks of chondrocytes. But doesn't collagen also play a role in soft tissue and chondrocyte synthesis? Yeah.
So what we know is that your cartilage is going to be made primarily of a type of collagen 2.
Right.
We know from some really nice studies in the literature that the studies showed that if you take in a randomized clinical trial 10 grams of gelatin or collagen hydrolysate a day, what they found is that the thickness of the cartilage using advanced MRI techniques was increased over an 8 to 12 week period. So it is something that is actually stimulating not only bone, not only tendon and ligament, but also the cartilage, to the cells within those structures to begin to synthesize more collagen.
Okay, so let's talk about something a little sexier for my audience, right? We're all into building muscle, and not because we're a bunch of meathead bodybuilders, but because part of the longevity prescription, increasing health span along with lifespan, requires rigorous, intense, strenuous exercise. We know that. I mean, research has shown it. The strongest do live the longest, blah, blah, blah. So we're all about building muscle. Now, part of the hypertrophy response is not just the uptake of sarcoplasmic fluid into muscle fibers and or the stem cell differentiation to new muscle fibers, but also the house that the muscle lives in, which is the fascia, right? This is avascular soft tissue. It's just a continuation of the tendons that hold that hold the muscle to the bone or the attachment, the insertion, blah, blah, blah. So doesn't it stand to reason that if you are feeding that new tissue, it can also kind of grow along with the muscle?
Definitely. So my laboratory, well, we've started by being people who are focused on increasing muscle mass and what are the molecular signals that lead to an increase in muscle size and strength. And what we've always focused on traditionally is muscle size as the big outcome measure. And a number of years ago, I was working with the English or the UK track, but also English cycling.
Okay.
So the British cyclists, when I went there, we were talking about increasing muscle mass. This is going to improve performance. But what they were talking to me about was, look, we get a big increase in strength with no increase in muscle mass, no increase in muscle size. And so at that point, I really had to start rethinking what I was doing, because if you're getting an increase in strength without an increase in size, there has to be some sort of a mechanism that underlies that. And we now think that the connective tissue is exactly what's the difference. So the way that we explain it is, if you've got a connective tissue within the muscle that's like jelly or like an elastic band, when the muscle pulls on that stretchy system, what happens is that stretchy system pulls and it stretches, but it doesn't allow you to move the weight, which is your body or whatever weight you're trying to lift. So as your muscle contracts, it's pulling against this rubber band. It stretches, but it doesn't allow you to move, and it doesn't allow you to move strongly or quickly. As you increase stiffness of the connective tissue, that muscle is contracting exactly the same, but now it's pulling against a rope instead of an elastic band. And now what's going to happen is the weight is going to move sooner, it's going to move faster, and that's going to be an increase in strength, but also an increase in power. And then if you increase that stiffness more, it's like pulling against a metal rod. As soon as the muscle produces any force against the rod, it's going to transmit that force faster, more true, and that's going to result in an increase in what we call force transfer of what the muscle does, so the contraction, to the movement that you're trying to produce. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we know is that as you increase stiffness within the structure, you increase strength, you increase power, and you increase economy if you're a runner.
Okay. I have a different opinion, and I am not a doctor, scientist, or anything else. But I'm just going to throw this out there and put my foot in my mouth, okay?
Okay.
The Golgi apparatus is designed to get feedback to protect the muscle from tearing itself off the bone, basically. And I think that you're right in that when the structure of the muscle, which is the casing of the muscle, is not up for the job, it may actually govern and restrict the muscle from actually activating all of its strength. We see this when things like anabolic steroids are introduced, and we hear people tearing, muscles right off of bones, because now all of a sudden the impetus for contractile force is so much greater than what the muscle can actually handle. But with that being said, I think personally, and again, I'm sure I'm wrong, but I think that the muscle is trying to protect itself. You're right. I think that the stronger the soft tissue is, the muscle can then cut loose and do its job. From a hypertrophy standpoint, we know from years of debate. I mean, I've been doing this show for 11 years, and it's been going on for probably 100 years before that. The type of training that begets strength increases and hypertrophy are very, very different. And that's why I think soft tissue plays a big role in hypertrophy. So in hypertrophy, filling the muscle full of blood, lactate, it signals certain growth factors for the muscle to actually get larger. But from an evolutionary perspective, this is actually a negative, because it requires a lot of caloric expenditure to have bigger muscles. Strength, on the other hand, is a neuromuscular adaptation, which again comes full circle to your assumption here that the casing still has to be up for the job. So I definitely agree with you. I agree with you 100%, the importance of soft tissue in the development of force. But I also think there's a certain portion of it that actually is the body protecting itself because it knows it's not for the job. And here's a guy who's torn 3 attachments off his left hamstring, tore his tricep off of his elbow more recently and just had it reattached. And I've also torn the outer head of my bicep by pushing past what I should have been doing and forcing the soft tissue to jobs that it wasn't up for. So I agree with you. I just think that there's maybe a little little feedback going, hey, we're not going to let you hurt yourself here. So make that soft tissue stronger, and maybe we'll let you get there.
That's definitely a possibility. But what we normally see is that if you're training only, so we know that how you train is going to be very important for how stiff the connective tissue becomes.
Okay.
And really what we're talking about is two different systems of connective tissue. We're talking about one which is the intramuscular connective tissue, which is attaching and allowing you to transmit force within the muscle.
Okay.
And that's going to protect each individual fiber from injury. And then we're talking about the tendon, which is a shock absorber for the whole muscle. Now, the tendon is functioning as a shock absorber for the whole muscle. What that means is that it normally has a stretchy end towards the muscle, and at the bone end, it's got a stiff end. What a tendon is, it's a tissue that has different mechanics along its length. The reason it has to do that is because it has to protect both the muscle and bone from injury. As we train, if we train fast, we can increase the stiffness of that tendon. And if that's all the training that we do, what we're going to do is we're going to progressively increase the stiffness of the tendon. If the tendon becomes stiffer than the muscle is strong, when you do a movement that your body is normally able to do, your tendon no longer stretches because it's now stiffer than the muscle is strong. So instead of the tendon stretching, your muscle stretches. And so what we see all the time is people who are doing these performance-based movements continuously, they're going to get a progressive increase in stiffness. That increases their performance so that their tendons are stiffer, they can go faster, they can do all these movements quicker, more powerfully. But then what happens is that tendon becomes just a little bit too stiff. And instead of it stretching during a very intense movement, now it's too stiff to stretch. The muscle stretches. When your muscle stretches at a high force with a large load, and it's stretching, it's going to much more likely rupture. It's one of the reasons why every Olympics you'll see people in the 200, 400, and 800 who are tearing their hamstrings, because all they've done to train is to progressively increase the stiffness of the system, because they're trying to perform at their maximal.
Gotcha.
Their maximal means that they're at their maximal stiffness. They just go a little bit past the stiffness or the strength of their hamstring muscle, and then just as they're about to hit the ground, well, actually at contact on the ground with that front leg, they're going to rupture the hamstring. You see it all the time in athletes who are only doing quick movements, because those fast movements, they're increasing the stiffness of the tendon. We also know that if you have tendonitis, and you go to a physical therapist or you go to a good orthopedic surgeon, all they're going to do is they're going to prescribe to you slow lengthening contractions, because it's a heavy lengthening contraction that's moving slowly. By moving slowly, you change the cellular processes that are happening within the muscle-tendon junction, and you actually decrease the stiffness of the tendon. So what happens is when you're moving slowly in those movements, you're decreasing stiffness. You're doing what we call a protective movement. Mm-hmm. And then when you're moving quickly through the range, now you're doing a fast movement. That fast movement is going to increase stiffness, increase performance. So we call it a performance move. So basically what you're trying to do if you're training is you're trying to offset performance moves with health-based moves or protective moves.
Yeah.
So if your listeners are lifting for life because they want to improve their quality of their life, and they have no performance measures, they're not going to have to compete in the combine. They're not going to have to go to some large competition. At that point, it's best just to do slow movements,
right?
Because with those slow movements, it's going to protect you from injury. It's going to allow you to get the muscle hypertrophy you're looking for, but it's also going to be healthier for your tendons.
Interesting. This is really, really good. I like this. Okay, look, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we've got lots more questions. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low-carb.
Never before has a product been so appropriately named as Botanic Tonics Feel Free. This plant-based elixir combines a variety of different effective compounds, all from raw plant materials that at different doses provide you with completely different experiences. A third of a bottle puts you in the zone and makes you very focused and is ideal for a non-stimulating pre-workout. It also has a mild analgesic effect for us older lifters who have soreness and little pains and aches that keep us from training as ferociously as we want. A half a bottle will create a mild euphoric effect that will allow you to forego consuming alcohol but still be socially lubricated and have fun. I have never had a product deliver on its name the way Botanic Tonics Feel Free does, and I won't ever be without it, and you shouldn't either. Go to shrnetwork.biz/feelfree and use the code SHR40 for 40% off your first order. I promise you, you will not be disappointed.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. We're ripped and we're ready.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Kieth Baar from UC Davis. We're talking about gelatin. You should incorporate it into your daily protein intake. So gelatin also benefits people who want to improve their skin and hair, for the ladies in the audience. I mean, that's all collagen-based stuff that happens to us as we age and our skin starts to stretch, right?
Yeah, well, that's the idea. There's nothing. Again, it's one of those things, as you said at the beginning of the program, where there's lots of anecdotal evidence that people take it for their skin and their hair, and they see a big difference. There's actually nothing in the scientific literature that shows that that's true. But given the fact that when we have people eat gelatin, we see an increase in collagen synthesis, we would anticipate that there would be a beneficial effect for that as well, yes.
So am I doing the right thing? Right now I'm making my post-workout drink. I'm using my normal dairy protein. I put a couple raw eggs in it, a couple other things, creatine, and now I'm adding 11 grams of collagen protein powder. Great Lakes makes it. I obviously could use Knox gelatin. Right. And I'm doing that post-workout. Is that a good idea, or should I be using it multiple times throughout the day?
So we would suggest that it's done a slightly different way, simply because of, again, a difference between what the connective tissue and the muscle is. We don't have really good evidence for this, like a definitive study where we've done it before and after, but because, as you've said earlier, that connective tissues like tendons, ligaments, etc., and the intramuscular connective tissue, they're pretty much avascular tissues, which means that they don't have a lot of blood supply, unlike muscle, unlike bone. So when we take something in after exercise, if that tissue has a lot of blood flow to it, like muscle, there's easily a 2+ hour window where you've got more blood supply to that muscle. But then even after that 2 hour window, because every time we eat, we get this hormonal response that allows us to increase blood flow to muscle and fat. Because of that, anytime you're eating, you're going to get blood flow to the tissues that you're trying to get that supplement to, if there's good blood supply. For tendons, ligaments, connective tissues, because these are tissues that don't have a lot of blood flow to them, what we think is happening here is slightly different. We think that the way that they get nutrients isn't through, bulk flow through the vascular system. What we think happens is they're like a sponge. When we load them, you squeeze the sponge out. There's lots of water within these tissues, so the water goes out. And then what happens, just like if you were to squeeze a sponge dry and put it into a liquid, it's going to sop up that liquid that's in the environment. So really what we're trying to do when we're trying to get these things to our cartilage, our ligaments, and our tendon is we're trying to use our activity to deliver it. So what we want to be able to do is we want to have the gelatin in the system
pre-workout
before we do our exercise.
Got to be pre-workout, yeah.
So what we've done in the study that we published in American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, we gave the gelatin an hour before. We did that because that was when the peak of amino acids occurred. The peak of amino acids is occurring an hour after you take in your gelatin. You do your exercise. Now what's happening is the places that are being loaded, you're getting more flow through those tissues, through those connective tissues that don't normally have blood flow. If the synovium and all of these other liquids around those tendons, ligaments, and cartilage, if they are rich in those amino acids that we're trying to get to them, now that's going to be the stimulus that they need in order to respond. So we say that it's best to take these half hour to an hour before you're going to do your training. So if people are taking a pre-workout supplement or if they're doing something that has caffeine half hour to an hour before, that's a good time to also take the gelatin. The Great Lakes that you're using is a hydrolysate, which means it's going to go right into whatever juice liquid that you use to dissolve it in. So it's not going to be granular at all.
Right.
The one thing with the Nox is that it's not broken down that extra step. So it's going to form a gel. So if you want to do like gummy bears or jellies, that's great. But if you want to do it as a drink, something that's hydrolyzed is going to be much better. And if you're taking that in an hour before, that's probably going to load those cells with exactly what you're looking for.
So a lot of people in my audience, including myself, train fasted.
Right.
We do our cardio fasted in the morning, and then we go to the gym and we train fasted in the morning. So I could easily take my Great Lakes gelatin on an empty stomach and train, or would that impair the absorption and what I'm trying to do? Do I have to take it with food?
You don't have to take it with food. So basically what we think is important is not necessarily, a lot of the amino acids that you're getting. It's actually in any collagen you get what's called hydroxyproline, which is a modified amino acid. And then when you get these little peptides of hydroxyproline that your body absorbs. And we think that those peptides with hydroxyproline in them are especially important because there's really good research that shows that the cells that we're looking to activate are most activated by these hydroxylated peptides. And so if you're taking it on an empty stomach, all that means it's going to happen is it's going to absorb a little bit quicker. It's going to get into the system a little bit faster. So yeah, a half hour before. And because, again, this is flavorless stuff that doesn't really have a lot of nutritional, it doesn't have a lot of nutrients other than the pure amino acids that are in the collagen.
Right.
You're not going to be adding anything to the system that is going to impair any adaptations to whatever type of training you're doing.
And the vitamin C needs to be in the system at the same time as the collagen, or is it something that if you're taking a vitamin C supplement later in the day, it's just as good, or?
So what we would normally do is we'd make it up in a little bit of juice. But if you're looking to train fasted, what I do is I go to Trader Joe's and I grab their vitamin C powder, and it's a powder, so I can just add a little bit, or any other type of powdered vitamin C. And you're only looking to get in, say, 500 milligrams, maybe
right.
a little bit, or 50 milligrams to 500 milligrams. So it's a lot less than you would normally get in a supplement. So especially for people who are doing their aerobic work, if they're going to take in a high amount of vitamin C, that has the potential to decrease the adaptation to the
right.
aerobic exercise.
Right.
So we're not looking to do that. We're looking to take in just enough to provide the extra stimulus, because every time you go to make collagen, vitamin C is it's a cofactor in the reaction, and it's consumed in the reaction. So that's why you always need to take you always need to have a source of vitamin C, is because the vitamin C is used by your body, and when it uses it to make collagen, it's broken down, so it's no longer useful anymore.
I take a liposomal vitamin C. I'll just take a third of my dose in the morning with my collagen before I train. I'm going to start doing it that way too. And so what do you hope both clinicians and lay people take away from this research?
So the big thing for the clinicians is that we always, the response a lot of times, you broke a bone or you've got an injury. What we're going to do is we're going to rest it. We're going to put it into a cast. We're going to put you into boot. We're going to do something that's going to immobilize it. And that's fine to some degree. But what you have to do is, even early in the loading process or early in the healing process, you actually have to provide load. It doesn't have to be much, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and then a 6-hour rest. So you do 5 minutes of activity first thing in the morning, 5-6 minutes of activity at noon, 5 to 6 minutes of activity at the end of the day. That's actually going to accelerate the rate at which you're going to recover from any injury that you have that's a soft tissue or hard tissue-based injury. So that's the first thing, is just changing this mentality in the clinicians that, okay, you broke a bone, you're going to rest for 4 weeks, and then we're going to start to do something. Because if you do that, now you're already, if you're an athlete especially, you've lost, it's not only those 4 weeks, but you're going to have another month to 2 months to recover your aerobic fitness that you've lost during that period of time. So we're really trying to get in there and say, even before, you're able to load completely on that, we're just going to do a small amount of load. It doesn't have to be, high impact load. It just has to be enough to get those cells to respond. And so if we can start to change that and also get into this idea where instead of doing 30 minutes of physical therapy, now we're doing 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, 5 to 10 minutes at lunch, 5 to 10 minutes at the evening, we're going to accelerate the rate at which we recover. So that's the first thing. The second thing for normal people or for lay people or for athletes who are out there, what we're looking to do is we're looking to say, look, if you've got a history of stress fractures and you're a long-distance runner, now go ahead and do your big long-distance running. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have 6 hours later, I want you to do a very short session, an hour after you've taken gelatin, so that you can load the system, and that's a protective session for your bones, your tendons, and ligaments. And that can be true not only for runners, but for young people who are baseball players who have a history of shoulder problems, volleyball players who have the same thing. What you want to do is, you're going to have a period of time where you're going to do a large volume. But then what you want to have is you want to have a separate session that's a short session that's done after you've had some gelatin, where you can load the system that you are going to be loading when you're going to be doing your sport, but it's in a controlled situation that is designed to optimize the performance of your tendons, ligaments, and bones. If we can get people to do that, a lot of the things like the Tommy John surgeries that are happening to kids who are 16 years of age,
right,
we can get rid of that. We can get rid of a lot of that because all we need to do is understand how the system works, understand that we need to do some protective things for those bits of our body that aren't designed necessarily to take this huge volume that we're giving it.
Right. Interesting. And chances are, from an evolutionary perspective, we would have been getting a lot of this stuff because we ate the entire viscera of animals, and we got a lot of collagen from that as well. Great. Exactly. This is great information, Dr. Baar. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Take care.
Hey, listen, that's the end of today's show, and we'll see everybody tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Thanks for listening today.